Good evening, everybody. Let's start this meeting. It's 7:03, Morton Grove Public Library Trustees meeting, September 8th. If I could ask you to stand, we'll say the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary first. Call call.
Yes. Mr. Elvers.
Here.
Mr. Berg. Here. Dr. Kellerman.
Here.
Mr. Goldstein.
Here.
Mr. Hoffman.
Here.
Mrs. Peters.
Here.
And Mrs. Quinn.
Here.
We have quorum. First point of order, approval of minutes, July 7, 2011. Special session executive.
I would just like to make a note that there is a cassette tape that also exists of this meeting that is completed in its entirety.
We can't hear.
I would like to note that there is a tape for the July 7th meeting that is complete in its entirety of the executive session.
Thank you.
A cassette tape.
First 30 seconds.
Correct, on the cassette, on the voice, on the wave one, the first 30 seconds are not there, but on the cassette one, it is there.
So is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of the July 7th executive session.
Is there a second? Any comments or corrections? Okay, approval with the changes. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. July 14, 2011, regular meeting. Motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes of the July 14th regular meeting.
Is there a second? Comments or corrections? All in favor? Passes. July 14, 2011, executive session.
I have a small correction.
Well, if there's, so if there's any changes.
Minutes of an executive session should only be discussed in executive session, because they're executive session minutes. So if you're going to have a discussion about that, we'll be in the executive session.
We can cover during. All right, we'll move that later. Special reports, I have none. At this time, there's public comments for agenda items only. Are there any public comments? None. We'll move to President's report. You would have noted tonight we have a new agenda which allows for comments from the public both on agenda items and then later in the meeting on non-agenda items. We also moved to the Baxter Room to allow for greater attendance by more involved citizens. You'll note a camera in the back, that's MGTV. They agreed to come here, basically do us a favor, tape the meeting, and help instruct us how to take these meetings and post them up on YouTube so we can give more accessibility to our patrons and our public. There is a possibility too that they may take this meeting and post it up on MGTV, so I'd like to thank them for being here tonight. There's also a statement on the bottom of this agenda that allows those that need special assistance the opportunity to contact the directors. And should you need any special accommodations in order to make the meeting, you've got a phone number and an email address you can contact. We're also, if you look at this agenda, we'll be talking about taking some of the first steps towards making parts of this building more ADA compliant, or at least beginning those discussions. And then finally, the budget will be starting shortly. Pardon? Yeah.
It's my understanding that once you start improving, changing any ADA, you have to do the whole thing. You can't start.
We're going to start comment
Ask the
noted.
attorney.
Well, comment noted, but we're going to start the discussions this evening on moving towards making the building ADA compliant. So lastly, we'll be starting the budget process. This year we'll be actively seeking a lot of input from the department heads, and this budget's going to be zero-based, or basically being built from the bottom up. So it won't be based on what previous budgets looked like. And that would conclude my report. And now if we could just have the treasurer report up.
I believe that you've all received the cash statements, the income statement, and the check register in your packets, and then you had plenty of time to, and the special reserve balance, and you've had time to review them. Does anybody have any questions on any of those documents?
Where, maybe it just didn't come in my packet, but where was July? The closure on July from the register, and I know this is August, but where did we close out in July?
I thought I sent everybody a packet in July.
Did everybody else have July except me, and if that's okay?
I received one in July.
Paul, do you have July?
I probably have. If everyone has it, there's a good chance that I have it somewhere in my file.
You have August. You don't have July. Okay. Do you have
Should
July?
I'm not here, but it's not that it wasn't. Kevin and Natalia, I just have to ask whether or not, do we know it was sent out? I received the packet, but I don't recall.
We sent out the first report. Was there, well, we emailed that. Right.
Yes, I got that.
So did a packet go out for July?
I have the reports, I did all the reports, but now, I thought I did, but
And I know I have them all. I don't know if it came as part of my treasurer's stuff, or if it came separately. I can't tell you that. But you can certainly be given a copy of July.
Okay, we could just reconcile it.
Everybody.
Can we email copies to all the trustees?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, then, do you want questions in order by document? What do you, how would you like?
Wherever you
All
want.
right, let's start with the income statement. So I guess, one of my first questions is around from just a proportional basis and a trend line. How do I think about the expense from a professional salary going up close to 50% versus what our run rate has been this so far since professional salaries, for example, the current month represents $95,032 versus the month of April, May, June, all closed at $62,757.
I can guess, Blanche?
There's three pay periods.
Got it. So then where does that reconcile back out? So, oh no, I got it.
So 3 versus 2, you
Yep.
have your 50%
Yep.
jump.
Is there another situation where that's happening between now and the end of the year?
Yeah, I'm looking at my calendar.
There's usually several.
Yeah, it's usually,
Throughout a year, yeah.
you end up with one
One
on
was
the
in March.
Right.
One was in March, and it's August, so that's the only two.
Those are the only two.
The rest of the thing.
Okay. Okay, so then the next one, I guess it'll be a general, well, let me ask the question on the cash statement. The reconciliation, it's pretty big this time.
What do you mean?
On the cash statement that just got passed out, this one, right here, as of 9/8/11.
What line are you drawing attention to?
Well, call it the third line or the total altogether, where, just wondering where the 100,000 went to. Usually we don't have that big of a reconciliation when we come to this meeting in about a week's worth of difference. See what I'm saying?
Are you looking at?
Well, it's more than a week. Go ahead, Blanche.
I'm not sure, are you looking at Illinois Fund?
Yes.
She's looking at the difference between the 1.5.
Usually they're closer
And the
together, it's a
1.4.
pretty big gap.
Money was taken out for this, the checks for this month already.
For the third big period that I just asked about.
A whole bunch of money was transferred. Usually it gets transferred Friday, but we did it this week earlier because we didn't make it.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Okay, well then I'll ask the same question I asked last time. So, any issues in closing out from your expertise in taking a look at this, from, you know, the process in general, closing out the books and knowing where everything goes and all the checks and
We'll be addressing that a little bit later when I talk about the SIGIT report.
stuff? Okay.
The SIGIT report.
That'd be 7A on the agenda.
Any other questions?
Yes, on the finance committee, as a member, I was never informed of any changes until last night. And I object to that, because I should have been informed. So
Did you read your email?
yes, I do.
Okay, so you
Got my
realize,
report too.
actually,
Yes, you did. You said on the next email that you did.
That you did what?
Mr. Goldstein's bringing up an issue that's off the agenda, but about the finance, the date of the finance committee meeting. And it had to do with the email.
Right.
You not receiving the email
No,
until,
timely. I wasn't asked by you, and I am a member of that committee,
that's not true.
if I
Mr.
was
Goldstein.
available.
That's,
I was never
the time of the meeting was set to the availability of the guest, who was Ms. Rios. All of us had to
I
be,
was never asked anything about it, about going into that at all.
we had to coordinate between six
No, no,
people.
well, my objection is that I was never informed you were looking for a financial officer. I was never informed of that.
It was mentioned at the meeting.
No way.
Sure it was.
Show me.
Finance Committee isn't on the agenda, Mr. Goldstein. Can you address this during the Finance Committee meeting, please?
Sorry, treasury report concluded.
Yes,
You wanna talk about
except,
signage?
actually, the retirement plan, we all received the Morton Grove Public Library Retirement Plan, the actuarial valuation as of January 1st, 2011. To make a very long story very short, unless anybody has any questions, the good news is that the pension plan is fully funded, and that in September, we will be paying this year's payment of $69,554 in order to keep that account current. And so that's the upshot of that document.
And that's always been the case.
Yeah,
Always.
yes. Okay. If there are no other questions, then I'd like to move on to the village, the management letter by Sigich.
And as a note, Dan Berg is listed on the agenda. He called me yesterday and told me he had something come up, so he wasn't able to come here and present this. But he told us to go ahead. He's going to come to next month's meeting.
Okay, questions? There were some questions I had on his presentation.
On June 15th, 2011, we received a letter from our auditor, which is Sikich, is the name of the firm, our auditor, Dan Berg. And in performing an audit of the basic financial statements of the library, he found that there were a deficiency existed in internal controls. And also, he identified certain deficiencies in internal control that he considered to be significant deficiencies. The letter goes on to delineate these significant deficiencies. The first is that when they received the trial balance for the library, they noted that the special reserve fund was not included when they received the trial balance, the special reserve fund was not included in their trial balance. On further review, they noted that the special reserve fund had not been closed for the prior year. Due to this, they recommended that the library post journal entries and reconcile bank balance accounts on a monthly basis, which before that had not been being done. To that point, we have met with the directors, myself, Blanche, and Ryan Horn from the village have all met and have instituted new ways of doing things here so that the bank accounts will be reconciled on a monthly basis, and we have also gone back retrospectively and gotten that taken care of.
Question, please. Why was I not included in that meeting? I'm a member of your committee.
It wasn't a committee meeting.
What was it?
It was a meeting of the treasurer and the directors.
The treasurer.
I'm the treasurer. It wasn't a committee meeting. It was myself, Ryan
You
Horn,
don't think I should be informed?
Why was Ryan Horn involved?
because we are working with the village in order to straighten this mess out.
Yes.
I'm reading this, and on page 2,
You don't-
it says special reserve fund.
The special reserve fund was funded
The
in
mess is
2009.
the
This would've
certain
been the first year.
deficiencies in
And there
internal
were no
control that are
errors found.
considered to be
There,
significant deficiencies.
Were there any errors found
Please address the chair and not me.
that you're making a statement?
Would you like to put together a list of questions for Mr. Berg? He'll be here next month.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Interestingly, when we got this in our packet and we did all of our sufficient rereading as we were supposed to. So I actually called Mr. Berg up because I wanted to understand his verbal point of view on what this was. Because from a...
I prefer Mr. Berg speak for himself and not hearsay during board meeting. He'll be here next.
It's
he'll
not
be
hearsay,
here.
I am
Sure
a
it
board
is.
member as well, so I would think my point in conversation...
Excuse me, are you on the treasury? Are you on the treasurer committee?
On the finance.
On the finance
Ours is,
committee,
but
or are you the treasurer?
But you wouldn't let me talk.
Unbelievable.
Mr. Albers, are you gonna let me finish, or do you think everything that's gonna come out of my mouth? Thank you. I called him up today, and he will verify that as need be. We had a nice conversation, and I asked questions around how do I grade a level of, there were 5 itemized things that were on here that were addressed. Is 5 in his level of expertise, because they are the experts that deal with our village, our library, as well as a whole host of other very similar entities. Is 5 a lot? Yes or no? Is 5 an average? Give me a gauge for should I be freaked out, or should I, concern myself, or is this minor issues? The fact of the matter is I basically asked them to give me a grade of 10 were extreme, that we need to set the place on fire because everything is chaotic and a mess. 1 being, this is real minor, stubbing a toe kind of thing.
And where did he put it?
Clearly less than a 5.
Okay.
Which I agree with. These are concerning things, and we need to address them from internal controls.
Then what's your point? That's what I'm saying, that we have.
I know, but what I want to do is make sure I calibrate, because I would think everybody would have the same question I would. Where does this gauge in context?
Well, I wish you would have asked me that. I could have told you that too.
You just referred him to the.
Here, let me tell you. I can tell you that in the history of this library, we have never received a letter like this. And so it is quite significant from the standpoint that we have never received a deficiency letter from the auditors. Because of that, we have taken immediate steps to address it and take care of it. And if you let me finish the report, I'll let you know how we did that. And that at the moment, there is no fire. There is no anything, because we fixed it. So I'd like to...
Trustee Hoffman, you have a question?
The reason we never got this letter before, I'm pretty sure it is because the Special Reserve Fund was set up in 2009. This refers to the audit done in 2010. This was the first time they audited that account.
That's not the only deficiency in the library.
What we're discussing now.
That's the
Besides
letter.
avoided checks.
The letter is talking about other issues than the Special Reserve Fund. It's talking about the prior year journal entries also, which is a carryover, which did happen in other years.
And this is the firm who audits the books every year. So this is the first time he's got that out.
It's the first time that there's been a significant problem with it, according to, as far as I know. What I can tell you is that we've gone over each one of these concerns and each one of these sentences, and we've resolved them. And I'd like to tell you how. For the prior year journal entries, they found that the fund balance did not agree with the prior year, and that the prior year journal entries were not recorded. They reported that the library posts all audit entries, and we have gone back into the books with the assistance of Mr. Horn, has been helping the staff in getting these entries not only posted, but posted correctly. Segregation of duties, asking that we are going to continue to review all disbursements, including payroll, which hadn't been reviewed before at a board level, but it will be now, on a regular basis as a means of compensating for the lack of segregation of duties. Some of the lack of segregation of duties is because of the small number of people on the administrative staff, so some of it cannot be worked around. As far as the problem with the potential problem with the voided checks, there has not been any fraud or anything that's happened with the voided checks. The concern with the voided checks were that they weren't being voided in a way that could preclude any problems from happening to them. Steps have been taken now so that it is an impossibility to happen. Credit card policy has been reviewed, and every single credit card receipt is gone over, and each one is put into its proper place in the budget lines. Future accounting pronouncements on page 3. That is the part that Mr. Berg will be addressing. These are changes that are, because of new laws, are going to have to be, some of these that are on this list will pertain to the library. Some of them do not pertain to the library at all. And Mr. Berg will review with us so that we are in compliance with all of these. So, in summary, the concerns that have been brought up by the auditing firm, noting that the significant deficiencies in internal control have been addressed and have been remedied.
I have a question.
Sure.
For my own education, what constitutes material weakness?
Material deficiencies?
Yeah, that's what's stated.
Yeah, it said, he gives up on the letter, it says a material weakness is a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control, such as there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the entity's financial statements will not be prevented or detected or corrected in a timely basis. We were not found to have a material weakness. We were found to have a significant deficiency. And the definition of significant deficiency is a significant deficiency is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control that is less severe than a material weakness, yet important enough to merit attention by those charged with governance. And so that's what we did. We gave it attention, we addressed it, and it's been fixed from here forward.
Is it correct to say that material weakness is something in the vicinity of a fraud or something?
Well, material weakness is much more serious, but we did not have material weakness.
I just wanted for my own.
Material weakness would be a step up from what a significant deficiency is. We were found to have.
Save some of those questions for Mr. Berg next month.
Right.
Does that conclude the treasurer's report?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Committee reports? Anything out of the finance committee?
Yes. In Finance Committee, in my review, it surprised me how poorly our investments are doing. At the first financial meeting, I asked the former director for the policies and strategies that govern our investment of funds, and all of these questions remained unanswered. So I've come to find out since then that there is no policy regarding investments, and that all of the investing was done solely by the former director. To that end, I arranged a meeting with Ryan Horn, who provided the names of 2 firms who manage municipal funds. And one of those 2 firms gave us a presentation at Tuesday's Finance Committee meeting, PMA Financial Network. Corby Rios, who's the vice president of the company, gave us her proposed plan for the investment of Morton Grove funds. We'll be looking at another fund, another firm next month. And also she is providing us with a framework for investment policy that the library will adopt. So sometime within the next month, we will be going over that proposed policy and hope to have it ready for next month's meeting.
I have a question. According to our bylaws, we are not allowed to invest in anything that can possibly be so-called dangerous.
Oh,
And it must be easily convertible,
Mm-hmm.
and we cannot go beyond a year. It has to be within that fiscal year.
There are laws that govern. Yes, we have no
So,
policy.
I gotta tell you, if we get 1%, we're pretty lucky.
That's not the point. The point of it is that,
That's the
according,
point.
back to our bylaws, Mr. Goldstein, back to our bylaws. Wait, no, I'm happy to tell you. back to our bylaws, it says that the library is supposed to have a financial advisor who invests
No, I'm
funds
not
for the
disputing
library.
that.
We do not have one. We are going to get one.
I have no objection to that. My objection is the way it's invested is very limited. And we
These-
cannot take any out,
Let me check.
It's my understanding that the investment firm that was spoken to first, and it won't be the only one,
Right.
they specialize in municipalities,
Let
and they
me-
can provide references
Yeah.
for other libraries.
Truthfully, there's municipalities that are going bankrupt.
Oh, yeah.
Let me tell you,
Absolutely correct.
really quickly, let me just tell you that this is the list of libraries that this particular firm works with.
No, I'm not disputing that.
Oh,
All I'm
okay.
saying is that our bylaws clearly make several statements, and we must abide by them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Paul?
I have one question, and this is probably covered in the bylaws. Any funds that we invest in, are these insured?
Yes,
Yes, they have.
Yes.
yes,
Assume they would have to be.
they all have to be.
Okay, anything from Building and Grounds Committee?
No, I'll be excited to see what you're gonna bring up, the new agenda.
No. Okay. Anything from policy? I'm not aware of any meetings. So staff reports, our directors have anything they'd like to report out on tonight?
Natalia will both be reporting on this, dividing it up kind of the way we've divided up our job responsibilities for the last couple of months. And we have 2 months to talk about, since we didn't have a meeting last month. So, as you saw in the report, July was the highest CERT we've ever had, and August was the 4th highest we ever had. And if you look at, I don't know the exact numbers, but of the 10 highest circulation months we've had, 7 or 8 of them are within the last 2 or 3 years. And the activity has really taken off. And it dawned on me as I was writing this down this morning that when I started working in a library, not this one, 35 plus years ago, summers were absolutely dead. You know, we couldn't keep people busy, staff. And it's just very nice to see that that's turned around and really making good use of the summer.
Hey, Deb, when you talk about circulation, just to help others out, what constitutes circulation?
Everything that's checked out at the checkout, yes.
Tapes,
Books,
movies,
videos,
games.
CDs, everything.
Everything.
Right. The other number I wanted to mention was the e-resources, which is the premium subscription databases the library subscribes to, accessible to anyone in the library and Morton Grove residents at home. And that was up 43% over the previous year, which we're really thrilled with. Let's see, in August, we removed a couple of restrictions on Blu-rays, Blu-ray discs. Patrons can now check out as many as they want, and they can place them on hold, which they couldn't before. Every time we introduce a new collection, Blu-rays, DVDs, even going back 30 plus years with VHS tapes, the collection starts out small, so we limit how many people can check out at one time, just to spread it around. And so the collection has grown to the point where we don't get any of those restrictions anymore on Blu-rays. In late July, we migrated to our new public computer reservation and printing system called Pieces Reservation, which went very seamlessly. Patrons and staff took to it very well. Not that different from the previous system, so that worked well. And at the same time, we also added a color printer because we had many requests for color printouts from patrons. I checked just before the meeting, and in the about a month and a half that we've had it, we've only had a total of 163 prints on it, which isn't a whole lot, but we're assuming that once, with school getting going and kids coming in to do reports, that will pick up a lot. We've had a couple more FOIA requests through August, so those have all been answered. But in addressing all the FOIA requests that have come in since we've been in these positions, we found that the library is actually required to have FOIA information posted on a bulletin board and have the FOIA page on our website, which had not been done before. So we're taking care of that. And I hope you know.
Several things I want to mention on the public services side. One of them is programming, and we successfully ended the Summer Library Challenge on July 31st with 182 adults, 100 of teen, and 946 of children who signed up. Unfortunately, only 408 finished it, but I think it's a really good number.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. There were a number of very well-attended programs. Among them, there were several new ones in youth services. It was a bicycle party. There was a new technology workshop, introduction to digital cameras. We had a new summer art camp for adults, and we continued with just scheduling a lot of programs. Very good attendance. You can see it in your statistics in the back. The other important thing, what happened was we finally got our new cards, and patrons can now choose which card they want, and it has a keychain card. We also, September is the library card sign-up month, and we started our program of promoting our card in local businesses. Everybody who comes to participate in business can get a discount and special gift. This year we also paid a special attention to summer school reading for our kids, and while we always had book displays and book lists, and we bought additional copies, we paid special attention this year. As I said, we created a special location. We put all the books for summer reading on a separate shelf. We created more book lists with whole numbers. We bought e-books for kids, and we also bought many more copies. So this year we hope that kids of Morgan Grove had a better chance of getting books here, and we're not sending them as much to Skokie or Niles or any other library. And I will just conclude this short report with another thing that we're doing. It's the reading. We are now involved in a large project of reading nonfiction on the balcony. You probably saw that it's full of books. It's very hard to get a book off the shelf because they just piled there. We started this project at some point, I think beginning of summer. It's a huge project where we will at once look at which books circulate, which books are in bad condition, and also look at the material that's outdated. So what we do, we read them, we put some books that could be sold in our book sale. We also recycle some of them through our partnership with Better World Books. We hope to finish this project at the end of October, hopefully. We're short on staff, so maybe it's optimistic. And then we'll start shifting books on the second floor on the balcony. So it will be much easier to get a book. I have some personnel issues to talk about, but we will talk about that in the executive session.
And then a couple more things. As I said in the librarian's report, we got the youth services and bathroom air conditioning units replaced. And while that all was going on, we had two other units that had multiple outages. The contractor was able to take care of them, but Claude tells us that because these units are old, it takes often several days to get replacement parts for them. Each year, library directors are required to file with the state library a statistical report. It's called the Illinois Public Library Annual Report. It's supposed to be filed within 30 days of the end of the fiscal year, which for us would mean doing it in January. Ours was not done, so we've been working on that the last couple of weeks. We'll get it finished next week.
Can I ask, it was not done because it just wasn't?
Hadn't done it yet.
What department does?
Who would file the paperwork or initiate the filing of the paperwork?
The director does.
And do we have this in the calendar for next year so we don't miss it?
Yes.
Okay, thank
It will
you.
be in January.
Thank
you.
I contacted the state library to make sure that we could still get it filed in September, and they said we can, which is important because that's required before we can apply for the Illinois per capita grant, which has to be in October. So that's our next project to start working on, along with the budget. And then the last thing I have is.
Excuse me, Kevin, are there any penalties for not filing this in a timely manner? Or are we not,
No.
yeah, or are we not eligible to write for grants until this is in?
If we didn't file it, then we would not be able to get the per capita grant. But so as long
Or,
as it's in.
and how about other grants right now? Are they on hold until that goes in?
There's no other grants that would depend on that.
Okay.
And that's, the per capita is the only regular grant that we do on an annual basis. The last item you mentioned, or it was mentioned at the last meeting about having tours for the trustees. And what we'd like to do is come up with a couple of dates that are convenient to as many people as possible. We think it would be best if we could do the outside of library hours so that we can talk without bothering people in the public areas. So, whatever works for all of you is fine with us. We would just throw out some dates, look at next Friday at 6 o'clock. And we're not doing just one day, we'll do it 2 or 3 times, whatever it takes. Or any morning next week at 8. So if you want to tell us now what you would like, or 1 hour, email us,
Yeah.
the next couple of days.
You can write in the morning.
That's right.
Friday at 6.
Okay.
Morning would work for me.
Okay. Anyone else for Friday?
Friday at 6. It's fine.
Next Friday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever pick the morning, I'll work on the morning. Like,
Okay.
I just gotta work around my schedule.
What about morning? What day did you say?
Whatever morning.
Whatever.
We're going to Friday because that's the only time we close early. But any morning is okay.
Any morning for Friday, so.
Tuesday or Wednesday.
How about emailing us?
Yeah.
How about emailing us?
Yeah.
Just tell us your preference, and then we'll be able to know that and take on it.
And if it's the following, that's, doesn't make a difference to us. Whatever dates are most convenient.
Previous years, we always did it before our general meeting,
Right.
coming a half hour earlier.
Well, but we were thinking that to be able to do it when we weren't open, then we're not disturbing patrons who walk around. We can stand in the middle of the floor and not have to whisper.
We'll email the dates.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. That's it.
I have one quick question for you. Looking through here, you found some inconsistencies in the employee handbook. That's in the August report. Is that gonna require a rewrite of the whole book or just certain sections?
No, there will be some additions, and we talked to ADP several times, and we just have to write several memos. We'll run memos by them, they will check, so to speak, and then they will issue an addition to it.
All right, thank you. Does that conclude the staff? Thank you very much. Anything from the public council?
Just briefly, since I came on board, I've been working with the directors on some of the employee issues, and we should have another item that we're working on right now is putting together a policy for email retention, and that should be available for next month as well.
Thank you. Moving on to new business. Previously mentioned, we're going to start to take a look at ADA improvements, and I would like to ask the Building and Grounds group to convene and start looking at some improvements around here, and then we'll get some definitive answers whether you make one improvement, you have to make them all, but let's find out, let's move forward, let's make something happen.
Why don't we ask the attorney?
He's not a building.
It depends, it depends on the improvements that you're gonna do, and that's why we would need to determine what you're gonna do.
This has been my understanding.
I talked to Mr. Hildebrand from the
Once you
village.
commence ADA improvements, we lose our grandfather in clause, and then we have to.
But that does not preclude you from looking at the issue, sir. We can look at the issue, and then we can make a determination whether or not to move forward.
I hear you, but understand too where I'm coming from.
Well, your point is very well made, and I think that everybody is gonna take that point into consideration, I would think.
The reason I'm saying this is because we've looked into it in the past. And it's been a problem because it's been shown to us that once we store it, we have to do everything. Some of the things you really can't do here.
I will vouch for the Building and Grounds Committee that we will absolutely do due diligence and make sure we get written sign off before we sign anything, because just because someone says it's okay verbally, I want full and clear written sign off and documentation. So
Good.
trust me when I say I will cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and I'm sure Mr. Berg is in the same camp I
I
am.
am in your camp for certain, because we don't want to open up the can of worms. Yet, my own comment would be, of some of the ideas that we bantered about could only be of benefit here. And yet, when you think that we would be held to a different standard when we are doing something that would be positive, is hard for me to understand, but I know exactly where you're coming from. I've been there before, yes.
So we will, if I take the direction appropriately, between now and our next meeting, we will appropriately post session meeting times in
Get
advance.
some ideas.
And do you have a certain deadline you want this meeting done by, or is it just between now and next month?
If we could make some determinations between now and next month, that would be great.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, the Building and Grounds Committee and we are in charge of calendaring?
Go for it. Yes.
Thank you, okay.
Yeah, so, director search, it is time we start to earnestly go about that process. So I make some, I don't know that you have your calendar with you, but I'd like to get this kicked off. I've got 4 dates in the evenings when I'm open. I can email this to you if you like, and we can pick a date.
If you want to email, that's fine.
I'll do that.
I will respond.
Thank you.
in a timely manner, I promise.
Yeah, I'll email those dates. 10C, the parking lot, and our directors have a report out there for us.
Yes, along with Trustee Peters, we met with Father Daniels, not Father Daniels. Yes, Father Daniels, I'm sorry. And well, I guess the 2 main points were that the Archdiocese began sending emails to previous director in January, which, as far as we can tell, have never been answered. I believe it was mentioned at some point in a board meeting, I think, about the cost being raised 50%. But as Father Dennis pointed out, it's because we're using 50% more spaces than we were originally contracted for. Just as library activity has increased, staff has increased a little bit.
How do they provide, how do they calibrate that?
Calibrate.
That they know that we're using 50% more spaces than what we were using before? I mean, is it
Let's
just
look
like
at parking lot. I
is it
mean-
like a random, like,
Well,
okay, it's Tuesday, and I'm gonna go
We
calibrate?
can attest to that too.
We have 2 rows
Yes.
at one end.
Yes.
And our cars, staff takes the full parking in the 3rd row.
In addition to the parking off the alley by the building.
Is it marked? Is it laid out that way? Did we do the layout of the spaces?
When we first signed this contract 5 years ago, something like that, we did put out cones cones in a row to segregate off our portion, and that just became unworkable for a lot of the maintenance.
Is there a determination of who was actually parking?
Well, we know staff cars.
I know. Well, I don't. You know.
Yeah.
And they're all staff cars.
Staff or patrons. Well, my office is by the window, and I see patrons walking two cars in those spaces, right? So, I mean, so given that, you know, the 50% increase seems appropriate.
When the Plato Academy was there, we weren't allowed to use the east portion of their lot because it was used by their children playing, and that was never a problem. There were never cars there if they were moved, and now that there isn't a Plato Academy there, and kids aren't playing out there, are they just expecting us to take over that half of the lot?
I don't think so. I mean, of course, we can't prevent patrons from parking.
We can't prevent patrons from parking anywhere, so. So my point is, if we don't go along with this increase and keep the deal as it was, which was quite pricey to begin with, who would police that lot, you know? Who would be in charge of policing that lot to see who parks where, you know?
I don't know as we could, if it's just a matter of.
If we're paying for it, we would have a right to it.
Right.
And no one else should.
Well,
Originally, we
spaces,
started
that's-
paying $100 a month.
I'm sorry?
Originally, when we first did it, it was $100 a month. Now it's $500 a month and going to $900 a month.
850 in the year 2013.
Well, I have some historical data for 2007, 2008, we paid $350. It just was increasing $50 every year, which is not so much. We paid in 2009, we paid $400 per month, 2010, $450, and 2011, $500.
The original one I saw was higher than this. This must be
The original
picture.
for the upcoming years?
Oh, yeah, this was revised in August. The original one that was sent to us was different.
All of this changed. This is not in what's here, but in the email that accompanied the August 8th one, the notation from the woman at the Archdiocese who sent this was that the only thing that was changed was the contact information from Ben's name to mine. And
I probably have a record of when it was first sent to us.
Yes.
And it was 910,000. That was the first letter that we got from the diocese.
Well, this is the new one.
Well, you're dealing with the
What?
current contract now?
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. No.
Okay, John, sure.
Yes, yes.
Over there. Great. We're the only, I mean, we paid for it, we have been paying for it, like, I'm,
You didn't ask for more.
right. So I guess I'm kind of wondering a couple of things. One, is there a possibility of, like, since this group right now is in the camp of there is no new building to be made, nothing or anything along that line, but is there a possibility of either a lease to own or we buy that property? I'm trying to determine, because there's not like a lot of use for that property today other than parking. And aside from parking, and what I'm slightly concerned with is basically subsidizing what tends to be a fairly high challenge from a kind of occupancy standpoint. When I take a look at it and say, is there a possibility that because we've done this for so many years, leasing it, can we like lease it to own? Is there any potential open dialogue to be had? Because it's a parcel today, we have determined we're not moving any further. And I don't feel, $750 a month feels like a lot for 30 parking spaces to me. I mean, I'm not far off to go to Metro and pay my $1.75 a day.
I was at the meeting too, and during that meeting, Father Dennis, I'm sorry, I don't know his last name, so Father Dennis, somebody, thank you. Father O'Neill gave us a breakdown of what the maintenance costs are for that parking lot. And it turns out that we are paying roughly 1/3 of the maintenance of the parking lot. The largest expense to that parking lot is snow removal. It is also resurfaced every two to 3 years, and it is patched as needed. And occasionally, last year was one of the years, but this wasn't factored into the cost. There was some major dig up and drainage work that had to be done to it. The reason that the increase is because we originally contracted for 20 spaces. We are routinely using all 30 and then some. And to me, it appears that what we have is more than a fair deal here because we are paying for 1/3 of the cost of it and getting the benefit of it 100% of the time that the library is open.
What would be the max number of staff we would have on the
It's not only for staff though, this is
I know,
patron
but
parking.
I understand that. So let me ask a question. What would be the max number of staff we would have here at a given time?
Well, if you look at the lot, let's say 9 o'clock,
Yep.
the 20 spaces are full, and
Some park on
maybe
the
4,
street.
5, 6 more in the third row.
And people park on the street.
Right. And what complicates it is that, of course, people coming in at 1 o'clock have to park
Right.
before the people leaving at 1 o'clock can leave. So, at 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock, that number goes even further.
Because there, in my mind, there's one thing where we're solving for staff parking because we know there's a fixed amount of time that they're here. And we know there's a fixed amount of head count for the most part where it will represent X amount. Accounting for patron parking and the variability with that and the flow given seasonality and the hours of the day, I'm not sure I'm solving for that. I'm trying to solve for the staff issue and that's, okay.
Krista, maybe I could shed a little bit of light on the whole situation, because you were saying, would it be possible for a lease or a long-term or a buy or something like that? I would go with a qualified maybe, having lived in Morton Grove for 35 years and being a member of St. Martha's Parish. At one time, the parish owned a large property on the south side of Lincoln, which was turned into condominiums. And we did sell that off from the parish. So
We did talk
anything,
about that.
anything could happen, and I would have to think if that were something that we as a library were going to pursue, it would be,
We did talk
we'd
about
have
it
to, we'd
with
have
Father
to talk
Dennis.
about it and talk about it with Father Dennis
Yeah.
and the Archdiocese. I don't think it would happen, but you never know, it might.
He said that the reason that they weren't considering it, we did ask if it would be available, is because they do use it for, they need it for parking for mass on Saturday afternoons and on Sunday, and for funerals. And so for that reason, it was not a possibility. And that's why we looked at the longest term that the Archdiocese was willing to go with, which was a 3-year lease.
Some history, when I was president of the board, I contacted the Archdiocese of Chicago to inquire about the land purchase of that parking lot, and they had no interest in it whatsoever. And it was an idea where we could build a parking structure, double the parking of the area, they still would have parking and money, and they still would not want to do it. So I don't know if that's changed. But if we're paying 1/3 of their maintenance cost of $500 a month, means their maintenance cost for that piece of property is $18,000 a year.
Last year it was more than that, because it was 29,000 last year because of the drainage issue.
Well, that would have been done with
Father
without
Dennis,
the library here.
What
so-
the library would have incurred it had we at least the property, but we didn't put those
Well,
numbers
of
in.
course it didn't.
What it amounts to is that each space is costing $25 a month, which is less than $1 a day. So it's, even if you told your staff to go and park at Metro, it would cost them more to park at Metro than it's.
Well, whether they can have an empty parking lot or,
Well,
we
that's not,
negotiate our term.
we're not gonna do that to our patrons. Are you really gonna have an empty parking lot sitting there for our patrons?
You're just gonna take unlimited funds to St. Martha's?
I think it's 1/3 of the cost is very reasonable.
How was it that when we had that snowfall, that they put all the snow in our parking area? We're not able to park the entire.
I
There isn't a whole lot that can be done about that. I mean.
We discussed it.
Also, we can't stop anybody from using it who goes to church. I mean, they're entitled to do it.
Church is
Yet
only
they're
open a
also
couple
taking
hours.
some of the things that we're paying.
The morning church happens before the library is open. The morning church is at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the people are gone before the library people come.
I'm sorry.
No, the morning, the daily masses. And on Sunday, the church is over with before the library opens. So once again, there's no overlap.
But they're also using the parking lot and causing it to diminish.
Well, they are paying the other 2/3 of the cost of it too. And just to throw another number into it, and this is very rough, but if you look at the number of cars parked there times the number of hours, what we use versus what the church uses, or
It's just like $18,000 seems like a lot.
but we are using it more than they do actually, in terms of
I hope so.
number of car hours.
So, we've had a lot of discussion. Do we have a motion on this one?
You have to recuse yourself.
I can. I've had absolutely no involvement in this.
You're not on the board of the church.
I've had absolutely no involvement in the negotiations
No, I didn't
of
mean
this
that.
part.
I meant you are the treasurer.
I'm the president of the parish council.
So we have a conflict.
Well, the contract had nothing to do with St. Martha. It was drawn up by the Archdiocese. And Mr. Elbers wasn't at the meeting. It was, I mean, it's up to you whether or not you want to recuse, but I
probably say an awful lot of things, but the bylaws cannot go above and cannot go above what the state law is. So in other words, the bylaws are not an ordinance, the bylaws are a guide for, they're a guide. They're a guide for this body to govern itself. This body cannot pass bylaws that restrict that the state will allow a person who's validly elected to office to do. Okay, so that's the point that I'm making on the bylaws. So the additional refusal is whether is under state law, you cannot vote on something that you have a financial interest in. Now, if Mr. Albers decides he's recusing himself because he's an officer of the parish council of St. Martha's, that's a different story, and that's up to him personally. But I'm telling you, as the attorney for this board, what the rules are about.
Read the bylaws.
I know exactly what the bylaws say. I've read the bylaws.
And
I've read the bylaws.
it doesn't say what I said.
What I'm telling you is that the bylaws cannot override state law. And state law is what governs. That's what I'm telling you. So the bylaws are, what I'm telling you is that in this respect and in other respects, the bylaws are not really adequate for their purposes. Okay? That's what I'm
I'm not sure you're correct.
Krista, you have a comment?
I have a question, actually.
First of all, excuse me for a point of order.
The board who could buy
We've been discussing this, I mean, really,
television.
we need a motion, we need a motion on the floor, and a second.
We could not
and then
allow
we
it.
can finish the discussion.
Okay, then I move we accept the 3-year contract for parking at the St. Martha parking lot for the amount of the Independence contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there further discussions? Krista?
Thank you. Sorry for the. From a legal standpoint, as I look at this and what it says, and it says this term sheet is not contractually binding. So, as counsel, how do I think what we're even doing, seeing as how what we've got in front of us says is not contractually binding? And, you know, nobody can rely on this letter as legal obligation one way or the other. So how do I think about what we're even pursuing and what we've got as a motion on the floor, seeing as how this isn't binding to either party?
I believe you read the previous contract also. It did not include a renegotiation at this time for that contract.
Okay, so I'm looking at the facilities license amendment term sheet. So the term sheet is similar to a letter of intent that the parties are going to enter into. So that's the issue today is apparently whether you want to enter into this letter of intent. And then from the letter of intent, I'm presuming that you would have an amendment to the release.
One more thing on that.
I'm not involved in the discussions on this, so just so you know.
I'm just wondering,
Go
like,
to the
okay,
next paragraph.
what am I actually, you know?
Go to the next paragraph, and it says, shall be leased as is, where is condition, which means that we're responsible for taking care of it.
No, what that means is
That's
that.
what it says.
What that means is that you're leasing it in the condition that it's presently in, and that there's no representation as to the quality and
That
character.
may be, but what if
Excuse
that's
me,
a problem?
wasn't I just speaking?
Yes, you were.
Thank you very much. And that there's no representation as to the quality or character of the property that you're receiving. That's what that language means.
Does it also say, then shouldn't it say that they will maintain the property?
Well, sir, I don't know what the actual lease agreement is going to say, because this is not a lease agreement. This is a term sheet where the parties are agreeing to the major terms, to the financial terms of the arrangement. And then I'm presuming, because I haven't looked at this before today, I'm presuming that there will be an actual lease agreement that will be signed.
I don't think we've ever had an actual lease agreement.
Well, then that's something that we're going to have to look into.
I think you should. As the attorney for the
Is there an actual?
Do we have a lease?
I was given one, I was given one, and when I asked for all the contracts that the library has, I do have a copy of the agreement between the church and us.
Does it say that they maintain it?
I'd have to look at exactly what it says,
I think before we go, we should find that out.
but it does. I think that what they're just looking for is a rider on our current lease.
Here's the issue that you have before you, just so that everybody understands what the issue is. The issue is whether or not you're going to agree with the archdiocese for these financial terms. That's the issue.
No, it's not only the answer. But your part, it's also an instance as to who's going to maintain it.
No, there's nothing on here about maintenance.
There isn't, but it says that we're accepting it as is. and we're-
This is a term sheet. This is not a contract.
It's your signing as a contract.
It says not contractually binding. We're trying to work out the terms of the agreement so that we can go on to get a contract.
If that's the case, then I will certainly agree. I'm just not sure if that's the case.
Well, if it isn't, I'll storm the church.
It's a
I just want to be
timesheet
sure
wherein
that
we
we're
can
not getting into
make
trouble.
out a contract, that's all it says.
Do the directors recommend this contract to the board,
This term sheet.
this term sheet? Can we have a vote on this?
Can you put in the qualification that the contract will say that the church will maintain the property? I think that should be a part of the good voting.
Well, we're voting on a term sheet that establishes.
I still say that we should make that a part
of the
I
contract.
think what we're voting on today is the price that they're going to pay.
So is it fair
Why
to
would we
say?
mention all that?
So, well, let me rephrase your question, Mary. So is it fair to say if we all agree to this term sheet today, the next procedure then becomes a lease agreement? And then who becomes,
Then we
who
should sign it.
officially, well, hang on, let me finish. Who officially then, if we agree to the term sheet and then we proceed further to a lease agreement as a normal process would happen, does that lease agreement come back in front of this board, or does that lease agreement then just get signed from a procedural standpoint? Because I think that might process might answer some
Okay,
questions.
if you, yeah, what you could do is you could pass a motion that would say that you authorize, or that the board authorizes the acceptance of the facilities license amendment term sheet, and authorize the directors to execute that as well as a lease, subject to review by the board's attorney before that lease would be executed. Or you could come back and revisit the entire lease if you so choose at a later date. But I would recommend that the streamlined approach would be to execute the lease once I've reviewed the terms of the lease.
So I amend the motion to state just what Frank said.
Okay.
Pending lease agreement.
Legal approval of lease agreement. We are legal counsel approving lease agreement.
No, the board.
Can I say something? This actually is overdue. It should have been talked about a long time ago. We received the preliminary one in January, I believe. Our lease expires October 1st. So it will be before the next board meeting, so.
They're not gonna build a fence.
Well, I know, I just, please, just let you know. It's up to you.
So sign this, just, and go along with the pricing, but it should say pending lease
They're not
agreement.
supposed to get a message.
Oh, yes, I'd like to amend the motion to say the adoption of the terms of the facilities lease amendment term sheet and signing of the new lease dependent on the approval of our council.
I disagree, I think the board.
Well, then somebody.
Do I have a second on this?
Second.
Because the council is also a member of the church. There's a little conflict here.
No, it's not, because I don't represent the church.
I agree.
I am the legal counsel for this body.
No,
not
we
the
all
church.
have warm thoughts.
Well, what does that mean, that everybody that belongs to that church on this board has to recuse themselves from voting on it?
I didn't say that. As long as the contract reads properly, I'll agree to it.
Then we didn't
I
have
just
to.
don't want us to get
Seconded,
into
it's
a
been moved
fix.
and seconded.
We had a second. We have a roll call vote.
Can I have who second?
Okay, I seconded, but before you do the roll call, okay, yes, I seconded it. Before you do the roll call, can you read exactly what you have written down?
Probably not. What I have written down so far is a motion to pass the 3-year term sheet with St. Martin Church for 30 spaces in the parking lot, pending legal approval of the lease agreement, dependent upon the approval of the board, this trustee
Board and attorney.
No, just the attorney,
Board
not the
attorney.
board.
of the board attorney.
I think what you want to have a motion that authorizes for directors to accept the lease amendment term sheet and execute a lease after it's been reviewed by your council.
That's pretty much what
Reviewed and approved by your council.
pending legal approval of lease agreement.
Don't we have a chance to look at the contract?
What's the timeline on?
We have to have this done by,
We can,
Says here,
as long as we sign this portion, there's no problem, because we'll pay them the rent.
so we can,
October.
we can instruct,
But it has to be pending under a reasonable.
we can,
That's not the motion.
let's,
We have to vote on the motion. then.
Art, we're not gonna put that in the motion. We'll instruct the directors tonight to provide a copy of the lease agreements to the trustees prior to signature.
So do we agree?
We'll all get a look at it.
Okay. We have a motion.
vote.
I was in that business for 7 years.
Okay.
It helped us.
Thank you. Call the vote, Paul.
Okay. Mr. Berg, I vote yes. Dr. Kellerman?
Yes.
Mr. Goldstein?
Qualified, yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
No.
Mrs. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinn?
No.
It's 4-2, the motion passes.
4-2, motion passes. Thank you. 10D, bylaws review by executive committee. We've talked about bylaws tonight. I'm asking the executive committee to start reviewing them to bring them up to date. There is something in the bylaws that actually requires the entire board to look at every bill being paid and approve it during these meetings, and it's something that has not been done in recent memory. So that's going to prompt a review of these bylaws. So something I'd like to get done by the end of the year.
Where did you find that?
I don't have any. You got it?
I do, I have one.
Is it section 6, article 3?
Yep, that's it.
Section
You want me to read it for you?
No, you don't have to read it for
Okay.
me, but that's just one of a couple parts that ought to be looked over.
Where did you find that?
Section 6.
Article 3, section 6.
It says to pay after approval of the library board, the expenses incurred by the library. And obviously, we don't have we don't bring every single bill in front of the board every month. It would be not reasonable. Line 4.
No, I see it, I just don't read it quite that way.
The directors brought that to our attention earlier this month. The director?
The director, so they read it that way, I read it that way. I think it's time we just all sit down and take a pass. We'll just go through these bylaws. And if there are any changes, they do need to be brought in front of the board for discussion and any change.
And there were several things that it's not right or wrong, it's just the way things haven't been done, for as long as we've been here. It's not that it didn't change.
We've always reviewed all of the checks that were paid as a whole after they were paid, true. But it's a check, further check.
Oh, sure.
On what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's the way we've been handling it.
Right.
That's why we have to change the bylaws.
Finance committee.
Not necessarily saying that the procedures need to be changed, that the bylaws need to be changed to match
The procedures.
how we have traditionally done things in many cases.
10E, the caps on book fines. Natalia,
We have a dollar amount limit at which patrons are blocked from checking out any additional materials. It's been $5 as long as I've been here, which is almost 30 years. And that's back when the fines were only 5 cents a day. And now the fines are 15 cents a day and $1 for DVDs and interlibrary loans. So with the fines going up, but the limit staying the same, it's very easy for someone to hit that limit in a very short period of time and not be allowed to borrow anything else. Just a small number of videos in a few days and you're blocked, or parents who come to the children's department check out a stack of books 2-3 days overdue, but they're blocked, they can't even review them. And so it makes a certain amount of sense just to keep the upper limit in line with the daily fine. If the daily fine were 15, we're proposing to raise the maximum, or not the maximum, but the blocking limit to $15 also.
Are there any fines or fees out there now? In other words, is there a large quantity of payables to us?
Well, obviously there are overdue books that are out there going to come back. There is a very small number of really delinquent ones that the circulation department is, actually actively having to work on to get back. There's one way to look at it is that there are people who, for whatever reason, when they hit that limit, whether it's financial or embarrassment or whatever, they are reluctant to come in to pay that off. And by raising, because they're blocked, by raising that limit, giving them more time to come in, we feel that will help.
I make a motion that we increase the limit from $5 to $15 at which we block patrons from further checking out materials.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Vote, please.
Dr. Kellerman? Yes. Mr. Goldstein?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mrs. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinn?
Yes.
Mr. Berg? Yes. Passes 6-0.
7, because I would vote yes.
Okay. We'll give it to you.
Thank you.
Can
11.
I make one comment?
Yes.
That's one of the things that I would like to just sense on a little bit, or, kind of find out, because when I attended staff day here, which was, I appreciate the opportunity. One of the things that was interesting that brought up around, particularly for new card patrons and stuff, that, potentially waiving fees for like the first violation if they were a new patron within a certain period of time. And I'm gonna not get it right exactly, you guys know what, but one of the things as I think about, and one of the things that kind of stood out this time around was our new cards kind of went down, and I think some of it was people were holding out to new cards even because they're so cool. But if I look at kind of people who are signing up for new cards and stuff, and I think about including some of the demographic stuff that you guys sent out with the recent census things, like how do we go meet some of those unmet needs and stuff? And so I just challenge you guys, and now we're solving it now, and I don't want discussion on it now, but from just to go back and think about that, and if that's something that's worthwhile to take a look at, it would be great to bring back in front of the board for discussion.
Thank you. That passes. 11, public comments and non-agenda items. Start on 11. Right? Anybody? Yes.
As a member of the Martin Grove community, I'd like to express personal thanks to Rosetta Metz for him to be the face of the Martin Grove Library for a long time. We're going to miss her.
Rosetta was one of many great employees we have here at the library, so everybody is appreciated. So thank you for your comments. Anybody else?
Yes, I also like to add to your comment that starting the Families for Fiction in school, which my own children were reluctant readers, which finally started to read. So, and others as well. I know the program is very successful today, and one of our valued members also won the award last year for it. So I just want to say thank you for starting that. Thank you.
Thank you. Left, center, anybody in the center? Got one in the back, all right?
A couple of things. First of all, I want to thank the board for moving the meeting into the Baxter room. The chairs are a little more comfortable here if you're a spectator. Secondly, I might suggest, since I'm an old man, I'm hard of hearing, which is part of the reason that I speak as loudly as I do, that it is very difficult to hear what is being said from the stage if you don't speak into the microphones. It might be useful either to A, get more microphones, or B, pass the microphone around when you're making a statement. There are a few other things that came up tonight that really kind of bother me. Having sat on this board, I was disturbed to find out that there's no investment policy. I was disturbed to find out that there was apparently a deficiency and that reports were not done. I was disturbed at the fact that while you're paying a legal counsel, when he gives you an opinion, you argue with it. I was disturbed that there was a problem with paying $30 a month for parking spaces, and there seemed to be some problem because some of the board members are a member of that church. It seems almost micromanaging and obstructionist. But the one thing that I'm the most disturbed about was the elephant in the room, and that's what wasn't talked about. And that's the 3 articles in the Bugle over the last 3 weeks, and subsequent articles on Patch. It is more than unfortunate that some of the actions have, either through ignorance, incompetence, or whatever, brought a bad taste to what is, in my opinion, a bastion of this community that has a number of wonderful employees who don't deserve to be tarred with that brush. And some of the excuses that have been made publicly, it is either that the person making them does not believe that the public is intelligent enough to see it as at best disingenuous, or the person making those statements honestly didn't know any better, which is even more frightening considering that they sit on a public board. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no more public comments. We're going to move into executive session. So can I have a motion to move into executive session? Second. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Paul.
Move to executive session. Mr. Goldstein. Yes. Mr. Hoffman. Yes. Mrs. Peters. Yes. Mrs. Quinn.
Yes.
Mr. Burke. Yes. Dr. Kellerman.
Yes.
Mr. Elder. Yes. 7:15.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Treasurer's report. Do we have a motion to accept?
We never went through the check register.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Who is Cersei?
Cersei.
Yeah, is our circulation catalog system, the software that runs pretty much everything in the library.
Catalog, checkout.
We only pay them, maintenance, licensing, that sort of thing, once a year, so it only shows up once a year. What you see there is a bill for a new server.
On a certain twice. It did. Also, we paid on August 31st, as well as on August 2nd. size of them?
All right, one is the Tonkin server.
6,320 right now.
Oh, the other one.
And then 8,300.
Yes, PC reservation, computer reservation system. It's not a Cersei product, but we bought it through them. And so they're the ones that the billing came from. So that's, yes, that's what we should. Yeah, that's unusual. Usually it's just one bill in January.
Thank you.
From them.
That was my question.
Was that it?
Can I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report? Can I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report? Dave, can I have a motion
To approve the treasurer's.
do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
I'll go back to my first discussion. As a member of the finance committee, treasurer, I was never notified about the change of meeting.
And that was
In
noted.
a timely time.
That was
I also
noted.
don't understand what happened to the last one. Board meeting, why that was, I never knew it was adjourned until I called Blanche and asked my package. I have not been informed by email or any other way.
I think
Not doing
we're
it.
approving the
Yeah.
treasurer's report right now.
So this is the treasurer's report. We'll address that.
That's the one table, approving the treasurer's
I
report.
thought we did that already.
No.
So
it's-
now do I
it's
get-
just seconded.
I have a second. There's no further discussion. You have a vote to approve.
Aye.
Aye. Do we need to do a roll?
It's a voice. Aye. Passes. Roll.
Roll call. Roll. Okay. Myself, yes. Dr. Kelnick,
Yes.
Mr. Goldstein,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Peters,
Yes.
Mrs. Quinn,
Yes.
Mark Elvers,
Yes.
carries 7-0.
No further communications.
That's what I was asking about. Communication.
If there aren't, I was notified that there weren't going to be enough trustees here to have quorum.
Who was at a time?
Who was on the
Who, who sits?
That's not part of the discussion. I was notified that there were not enough trustees here to have quorum. So
Who notified
I
you?
instructed, I was not going to be here.
So then you weren't notified because you weren't here. Who else?
I canceled that meeting on August 1st. It was published publicly and it was put on the website. If there was a miscommunications here, I apologize for it. But nobody showed up. for
There was
this
no
meeting.
communication, it was not put on the website.
Yes, it was. August
Yeah, it
1st.
was
You can explain. And
It was up there.
Kevin,
Not mine.
everybody's website
We
is made.
posted it, we put canceled on.
August 1st.
In a couple of hours of the most of receiving the notification.
I think you're talking about
On the
email.
library website.
Yeah.
Oh.
On the library itself.
Yeah,
I was not notified.
On our webpage, right, not, we're not talking about email, just on our webpage.
Should we be notified?
You would think.
Well,
I mean, you would think that.
it's, I mean, yes, it was a communications breakdown. It has not been the responsibility of the library in the past, meaning Blanche or the directors to do that.
I mean, every time I've gone to a finance meeting lately, it's been put at a different time, and I've never been notified.
We're not scheduling meetings, I mean, you understand,
No, but
that.
I really didn't understand. Because I get all of your emails on our new webpage. Why wasn't it on there?
Well, and that's what I'm saying, that we received an email from Mark, posted on the website, posted on the bulletin board, which we did. It has not been directors, or let's say Blanche's responsibility in the past to notify the board of those things. That would be the board president or secretary, some responsibility. Pardon?
We're not here every day. We should be notified or something.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying,
And
okay.
in the future,
We
there'll
did not
be a
realize it was our
notification.
responsibility.
Yeah, because I
If-
like your new method. It works out very well.
Right. But
But
we
I still
assumed Mark was telling, Mark assumed we. You know, I apologize if there's,
I definitely did not get a phone call or email or anything.
but you understand, we didn't realize that was our responsibility, that's all I'm saying.
They're sorry.
Okay, I have a motion to adjourn.
I just want to be sure it doesn't happen again. That's
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Meeting's adjourned at 9:51. Thank you.